if I press this button, that brings our countdown up. I hope it does anyway. 3 minutes and counting. There you go. 3 minutes. Right. Welcome along. If you are seeing this, that means you've either spotted it on our Twitter feed, which is going up on Twitter and also on Periscope as well. You'll have also had a notification on YouTube that we've gone live. We do this every 6 o'clock GMT. It is kind of locked to my time frame purely because of the things I do on a Sunday, which include a hospital radio show. But it does mean that you can kind of spread the word and let everyone know that we are live. So we're live on Twitch, we're live on YouTube, Periscope, and Facebook. We're also on Facebook as well, which means if you do follow me on Facebook, we have yet to add the functionality which we can broadcast this to our Facebook page. But if you go to my page, which is Leonard Sultana on Facebook, you can find the stream and share away. I'll make it public, and you can share it to any groups that you feel need a little bit of Comic Con in their life. Of course, we do our best to help as well with any questions that you have with badge sales or any questions about attending conventions. So please do spread the word with any groups that are wanting help and advice with attending conventions. And of course, we are going to try and do our after show as well on our Patreon page. So please join us at patreon.com/EnglishmanSCCC. Once we're done, we'll probably be at about a 10-15 minute conversation. As always, it's a freewheeling, free association kind of chat, and I just rant to camera. It's a little bit more, Englishman in San Diego after dark. So swears, I say boobs and wee and willy. So yeah, do join us for the Patreon page. It's a way for me to give back to our supporters, and of course we give you any updates about what's happening between now and the end of the year. Lots of things taking place, including Thought Bubble, so we'll give you our updates of what's happening at that convention. Do support us on Patreon, even if it's just a $1 or whatever you can throw into the pot, because it really does, every penny go towards allowing us to do what we do, including our hosting of the website, our licenses for things like this, which is StreamYard, which allow us to do our podcast, all the bits and pieces that we kind of show support to our writers and contributors. That's pretty much what we do. So please do jump in with any help that you can at patreon.com. And of course, if you are watching this on Periscope, you can give us the super hearts. And if you're watching on Twitch, you can give us the support via Twitch as well. I've yet to really do some proper research into what Twitch can do. This is a new thing, so bear with us. Thank you very much indeed to Into the Blue Mr. Afternoon all. He was one of our winners on our giveaway last week. Just to let you know, that will be going out tomorrow. It was a case of getting everything together and getting envelopes and stuff and nonsense, and basically getting everything ready to go out next on the mail for Monday. So there we go. Right, that's that done and done. Welcome along. My name's Leonard Sultana. This is Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. You can tell the kind of week I've had when it's not it's not a cup, it's a bucket of tea, and it's got plenty of sugar in it, and I'm going to be slurping along that for over the course of the next 60 minutes or so. This is where we talk Comic-Cons, con culture, and all the stuff and nonsense that you can see at shows like MCM, like Thought Bubble, like Lakes, like New York Comic Con, like Emerald City, like storytelling across media. We have had Dan Berry that's been attending that in San Diego, one of the sister shows that San Diego Comic Con or Comic Con International put on up at their new museum site up at the Balboa Park in the city. So do keep an eye on our social media stream, because we're going to be posting all of the bits and pieces that Dan has been doing over the course of this weekend at SAM 2019. Other shows, Thought Bubble, of course, will be coming up to that. So we'll be bringing our live show from that in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully I won't be too battered and bruised, because it's a new location and all sorts of things that we're going to be finding out about that show. We're going to be doing our preview of that next week. So do join us as we kind of look forward to Harrogate and the new location for Thought Bubble UK for 2019. But this is also a chance for us to talk to some great guests. We are going to be talking to Mark Searby and hopefully a special guest as well at the half-hour mark as we discuss MCM Comic Con, which took place in London this weekend. But we have ourselves our special guest for today, which is David Pepose. Hello there, David. How are you, sir? This is where I just make sure that you are muted. Hello there, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
There we go. Excellent stuff. No, Liz, it's a pleasure to have you on the show because I've been a huge fan. This is where you're going to get a bit of deja vu, because this is where every interviewer and every podcaster starts with this. I've been a huge fan of Spencer of Locke for absolutely ages.
Thank you.
And I'm a huge fan of Calvin and Hobbes, yada, yada, yada. You know the intro, you know the spiel. It is a fantastic book, and it is certainly the book, I think, you could say to say really put you onto the map in terms of the mainstream audience, people knowing what you do. But so let's go a little bit further back, especially when it comes to your con history as well. I mean, did you start going to cons first as a fan, or was it as a professional? What was your con history?
I actually, my experience with cons, I went as press. I got my start. My start in the industry was I was a DC Comics intern in college, and then I made the jump from DC to Newsarama. So I covered a lot of shows through them. I primarily covered San Diego and New York. But yeah, once I became a pro, that's kind of when I started branching out and trying more shows. I think the only shows I had done before I became a pro was New York, San Diego, and C2E2. And since then, I've kind of expanded to Baltimore, Denver, Rose City, Phoenix, Heroes Con, Awesome Con, and I'm sure plenty of others that I'm too not awake enough to mention right now. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of a fun jet setting kind of career. And it's so wonderful to get to not only connect with other pros, but just to meet readers from all over the country. I think especially as an indie comics writer, that's kind of the way you succeed. It's hard to get a lot of market penetration in a lot of different cities when you're competing against Marvel and DC and Image and whatever hot indie books are coming out. And so I feel like there's no substitute for doing the groundwork. And that's the thing I love most about doing cons.
Well, I mean, you certainly will have then seen, I mean, because I also followed you on Newsarama as well. You kind of got the sense of the landscape from a fan and from a press perspective. But being on the other side of the table is something else entirely. What was the biggest lesson that you felt you learned? Being a pro on the other side of the table. I mean, I'm guessing it really was a case of the whole juggling of money thing.
Yeah, culture shock was a huge culture shock. My first show as a professional was New York Comic Con 3 years ago, and we had just announced Spencer and Locke. We had a $10 convention variant of the first issue, which we had the wrong price listed on it. And I had never tabled before. I was woefully unprepared, and I watched Hoyt Silva, who's an artist. He's a wonderful guy, and I watched him engage with fans. Anybody who would come up, if they made eye contact, if they just were wearing a costume that he recognized, he was really good at making casual conversation. And then as he made casual conversation, he'd say, "By the way, I've got a book. Let me show you." And that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I feel like there are a lot of, I think a big misconception that a lot of pros still have is they think, oh, fans will come to me. And I don't know. I don't believe that. I feel like I try really hard to work on my outreach because, there's me and a million other people out there. What do I have that nobody else does? Well, I have a pitch. And so being able to be comfortable pitching people, that was sort of the biggest lesson I learned for doing cons. Everything else is just window dressing, and there's effective means of window dressing, but the outreach game is really the thing that I think makes or breaks my con game.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people when they kind of think of pros going to comic conventions, they think it is very much a case of mostly networking. It's meeting other artists and writers, and I'm certain that that's part of the element of it. But you also when I've been speaking to pros, sort of like as part of talking about conventions, especially when it comes to things like panels or distractions away from the table. And
Sure.
the common thing that comes back is any moment I'm away from the table, I'm not selling a book. And I'm guessing that bottom line really is something that's very important to you when you're going to a convention.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say all these things, because I feel like that's probably my weakest point is, the networking side. And I'll do panels from show to show, depending on who else I know is there. But yeah, for me, I always feel really uncomfortable when I'm not at the table. I mean, I make my rent doing these shows, and for me, I've got a girlfriend and an elderly dog at home, so every weekend that I'm away, I better be bringing the bread back. Otherwise, why did I leave California in the first place? And yeah, it's one of those things. I'm constantly kind of reevaluating my game. I'm always taking very detailed notes on what I'm selling, down to like every individual trade, which covers am I selling, and that kind of helps me start to predict what should I be bringing to shows, or is there something that I should be fine tuning in terms of a pitch, or is there a smarter way to sell these things? I feel like as I've gotten more books under my belt, I've been able to be a little more creative in bundling books together. It's an ongoing evolution, and no two cons are ever the same. And I feel like that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is the more you practice at it and the more shows you do, the more confident you get at it, and the more you're sort of able to fine tune the way you operate, and then you're able to be a little more informed and a little more empowered as a creator.
Was that something that you learnt pretty much from the moment you started tabling, or was it something you did research prior to actually being pro? I mean, was it? Or did you take? I mean, how much time did you spend going around and asking creators about? Okay, I know that I've been covering your output now as a reporter, but now I've got to ask you because I'm going to be joining you on that side of the table.
Well, first off, thank you for giving me that level of credit. No, I didn't do any of that. It's very much fly by the seat of my pants and just kind of learn by doing. I think in part because at least the way that I do that I operate, at least most pros that I sit next to, they always tell me, "Oh, I don't see anybody operating the way that you operate," and they usually mean that as a positive. Although I'm sure there are some pros that really get upset when I say the words, "Do you like Calvin and Hobbes?" for like the 100th time that day. But yeah, I feel like I'm always kind of researching to figure out like interesting ways to like up my game. A lot of Google searches in the middle of the night, and I always take stock of like, oh, what's somebody who's got a crowd around them? What do they have that I don't? And is this something I can emulate? I do think that there's a level of expectations that people have to have. I think writers and artists are operating in two very different ecosystems. And so, if I was able to draw and do commissions, that would probably change the way that I operate entirely. Because I'm a writer, it's just a matter of sell, 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 sell. But yeah, I think of things like, con banners. I was telling somebody recently that if you had one piece of equipment that I think is indispensable for a con, it's a banner. I think subconsciously readers think that is the stamp of professionalism. If you don't have a banner, people kind of their eyes glaze over and they don't pay any attention to you. Um, I've actually started doing recently in shows. I've actually done two banners. I've done one for myself and then one for Spencer and Locke, or whatever my most popular book at the time will be. Just so people kind of, if they don't know me, but they know the book, it draws them in. I think having prints is really important. They work as visual advertising. It's one big image that will draw people in. They'll look at it. It's just enough time to say, hey, if you like this, you might like this book. I've started working. I have a new.
That's when you start hitting your weight limit on your luggage. When you start looking at merch,
that's yeah, and then you have to start getting really crafty about how much can I fit, and is there a way for me to ship something in advance, or is there a store that is nice to me that I could buy stuff there at a reasonable cost? Is this, like I said, it's an ongoing thing. The weight concern actually is sort of the thing I'm excuse me, grappling with right now. And so Yeah, I mean, my con game this year has been very different than my con game last year, which was very different than my con game 2 years before that. And so, yeah, it's a process, and it's one that I'm very excited to keep growing. And I think every book you have, or every new print you have, or every new mini comic you have, that changes the game for you, and you find more and more ways to start leveraging what you have.
I think it's a question that I'd like to ask more writers and more self-publishing
Yeah,
publishers as well. When it comes to there's bringing and putting into the luggage plenty of the single issues, and
yeah,
that's great. I can imagine that the second that you start going to trade, and then you have to start working on the weight of how many trades you can actually take and how much you can fit in.
yeah,
That's something I don't think many people actually think about when we're going as fans. And you see,
yes.
say, goes to trade, and a fan will just go, "That's fine. You'll be able to see the trade." And there's the exhibitor on the other side of the table just going, "Shit, I have to bring. This is a lot of weight."
It's a lot. I bought on Amazon. There's a special weight device that you tie it to your bag, and you kind of lift up. And I always am trying to figure out exactly how much can I fit for 50 pounds worth of stock in my bags. And I've got it kind of down to a science at this point. Like I track my numbers, and I always tell people, track your numbers. It'll save you a lot of time and hassle down the road. But yeah, I think you actually hit the nail on the head. It's something that I didn't know, and it took me a long time to really realize is, yeah, the moment you have a trade, single issues take a hit. It's challenging to sell singles when you have a trade on your table. People see it and they just say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to wait for the trade." It's kind of this. It's a psychological thing. Um, I have found that there are ways to mitigate this. If you have multiple trades on a table and you have a first issue of a new series, I did this with Going to the Chapel at my last few shows. As I said, oh, if you buy both volumes of Spencer and Locke, I'll throw in the first issue of Going to the Chapel for free. And that way, you're effectively using one book to market another book, but you're not taking a loss at it. I mean, I buy all of my books at cost, so for me, it's a $2 loss, but I'm gaining two trade sales out of it. So it more
Yeah.
than balances out. Um, I've also found I've had some success in bundling my singles together, because sometimes you have collectors who say, "Oh, I missed out on volume 1 of Spencer and Locke. Do you have any of that?" It's not often, but I try to take a couple of bundles with me just in case, to say, "Oh yeah, actually I do have that, and I'll sell it to you for 15." And so it's less stock that's kind of cluttering up my apartment, and yet it's able to kind of make that sale.
It's all of this juggling, which I think a lot of people don't seem to realize or appreciate when it comes to people who are putting stuff on the table. And it's great that you kind of touching on it. Thank you very much indeed for
Yeah,
talking about it. When it comes to actual conventions and the convention landscape at the
yeah,
moment, and also the attitude of fans going to conventions,
sure,
as somebody who's been to a few as press and also as
yeah.
a pro, how are you seeing conventions in 2019? Are we still seeing a crest of a wave? Are we seeing any kind of forward momentum, or is there a change of
Um,
shift? Perhaps I don't know. What are you seeing when it
yeah,
comes to conventions?
I do think the momentum was a little down this year. Nothing crazy, but at least a bit of decreased momentum. And I think some of that is because the landscape is getting more crowded, and people are kind of going head to head with one another, and cons are making scheduling decisions in part based on that, and some of it's also just based on what they can get, and so I've been to shows this year where they're either taking place in the same day as a major city event, um, uh, or their security, they haven't figured out the best way to maximize security. And so if there's shows, if people are taking an hour plus to get into the building, that's a challenge for everybody at that point. It definitely puts a dent in sales, because people get frustrated and leave, and that sucks. It's something that I think con organizers are being cognizant of, but it's something that they're going to have to fight and figure out ways to mitigate. But that said, I still think there are a lot of shows that are still really strong and viable for creators. I mean, I always wholeheartedly recommend shows like Denver, or Baltimore, or Rose City. New York, I actually do really well at as well. And
well, that was going to be the question, actually, because the reason I was going to ask was, which do you prefer, the larger or the smaller shows? You kind of talked about a whole spectrum of shows there. You talked about some smaller ones there, and then you talked about one of the daddies of the lot.
Yeah, well, I feel like for me, it depends. I like bigger shows that have foot traffic, that of people who will actually buy things. I feel like a show like, and you kind of learn pretty quickly which shows are big shows that people will actually buy things at, and then there are other shows that are more pop culture oriented, where people are not necessarily buying comics, and you kind of you learn pretty quickly, like, oh, okay, I'm not making my money back, or I'm not making as much money as it would be worth me leaving town for 4 days for. And it always sucks when you have a con that you kind of have to cross off, and I usually have one or two of those every year. But for the most part, I've been pretty fortunate. I feel like any show that I've heard of, just in terms of my time as press, usually I'm like, okay, that's worth at least checking out. If not just for the pure dollars and cents of it, it's also, for me as an indie person, I con for the jobs I want, not the jobs I have. And so I've found that I've gotten a lot of traction with certain publishers, because they've said, "Oh, we see you at all these shows. We know that you will do the groundwork and you'll market your own book." But yeah, I feel like for me, it's always, I'm trying to figure out what are shows that the population would be interested in buying comics, and because those are kind of the ones that I'm like, all right, this is worth my time. I will make the money that is needed for me to justify leaving home. But yeah, every so often you kind of hit a lemon, and it sucks. And sometimes it's very unexpected. I had a show last year, and I won't name names to protect the innocent, but I had been told the previous year it was a gangbusters show, that people had sold hand over fist, and then I went the following year, and because of security issues, they had to beef up their security in a major way, and so people weren't getting into the con, and they were standing outside in kind of this abysmal heat, and so they gave up. They turned around, and sales dropped by like upwards of 50%, con wide, and that sucks. That's a show that I can't justify doing again.
Sure.
But 9 times out of 10, I've been really fortunate, where it's like, you if you hustle your butt off, the people will be there. And it's very rare that there are shows that are not. I will say, I guess for me, the smaller the show, the harder it is to kind of get that traction that I need to justify me being out. Luckily, for me, when I do smaller shows, they're usually local shows. They're shows like the Long Beach shows, where I'm kind of like, I get to sleep in my own bed. I know people there, so usually I can get either a comp table or a discounted table, and that helps in a big way. I also recommend, people, trying out conventions where, seeing if you can be invited as a guest. I've been very fortunate. The Fan Expo conventions, have brought me on as a guest for MegaCon and Boston Con, and those were wonderful shows that my profit margin was increased because I was given a guest table. So it's like I keep saying, and I'm sure people will be annoyed by me saying this ad nauseum. So much of it is practice, and the more shows you do, the more you kind of learn. All right, this is the kind of show that I thrive in. This is the kind of show I don't, and maybe even some of it's about the books. I mean, I certainly have. My con experience has definitely shaped the kinds of books that I am working on now, because I say, all right, like, I know this book sells to comics fans, and I know these books sell to non-comics fans. But sometimes I'll have somebody, for example, I'll say, hey, do you like Calvin and Hobbes? They'll be like, no. And I'm like, okay, what do you like? And they'll say,
I mean, quite frankly, if they turn around and say, "Oh, I don't like Calvin and Hobbes," they should be escorted from the building anyway.
Probably, but I've had people tell me, if I say, what do you like? And they say Naruto, and that's all they say. And for a while that used to bug me, and now I realized, oh well, like, okay, like I've had enough people tell me like a very sort of hyper narrow focus of what they like. What if I did a book that was kind of tailored to that? And so that sort of thing helps me out a lot. It kind of helps me figure out, all right, in terms of my general portfolio, what am I missing here? There are certain fandoms and demographics that I'm like, I really should do a book for people who like Star Wars. That's kind of how my book Grand Theft Astro got off the ground. Was I said, okay, I want to do something for the sci-fi Star Wars contingent. Or I have another book that I saw enough people cosplaying as Mad Max or Furiosa that I said, okay, I want to do something in that vein. And yeah, it's just, so I think in that way, my con experience, it's been almost like focus testing and figuring out kind of like, all right, there's different demographics out here. And what are the most stubborn people? What can I do to get them a book that they'll go home with?
That makes sense, and it really does tap you into the bloodstream of the people that are attending comic conventions, and I think that's very much an interesting demographic and a way of, like you say, market testing what you can then move on to your next project.
Yeah.
I'm going to open up to questions as well, so please, everybody, I know we've got a couple already. We are going to be diving into those very shortly indeed. But I also wanted to ask you about the work that you do with Action Lab.
Sure.
Because you've published Spencer and Locke and also going to the chapel through those.
Yeah.
What sort of support do you get from Action Lab when it comes to tabling at a convention, or is it more a case of you're supporting them, as it were?
No, well, it's one of those things. It depends on what shows they're at. I mean, Action Lab, they have a small staff, and so I think that, they're able to do certain shows, but like they can only be stretched so thin. Because it's just me, I'm pretty nimble about it. So I can hit, I think I've done 15 shows this year. So the shows that they're at, they've been very helpful for me. I've tabled with Action Lab at San Diego, at New York. I've previously tabled with them when they were at WonderCon a few years ago. And so, that's always very helpful. And they're able to, for example, at New York Comic Con this past year, or this past month, or 2 weeks ago. Wow, I'm still jet lagged. They were able to bring an extra like 50 copies of my book, which, as we were mentioning earlier, I'm already kind of hitting weight capacity at how much stock I can bring. And so, having Action Lab be able to carry a little bit more stock meant that I sold out of everything on Saturday rather than Friday morning. So, that's always been very helpful. I mean, Action Lab has been very supportive of me. Any chance they can get. As far as the work I do with them, I always really praise Action Lab for the fact that I think in today's landscape that is very IP driven, there's a lot of I think temptation on publishers' parts to kind of put their hands in the pie a bit and say, well, this is how I would tell the story. And Action Lab, I give them a lot of credit. They just say, okay, we really liked your pitch, and we trust you to tell the story that you pitched us. And sometimes there's minor deviations that are thrown in the mix, but really, Action Lab has never once told me you cannot publish this, you cannot do this story the way that you've done it. They always, I think really the only questions they ever ask me is, are you going to hit deadline? And that's. And thankfully, I'm usually able to say yes, or I know early enough that I say, hey, can I buy an extra 2 weeks? They've been really supportive and really wonderful. And I'm already working on Spencer and Locke 3 with them, and we've already been talking about other projects that we're going to be working on, hopefully in the future. So yeah, it's been a great relationship. I do think, certain publishers, of course, have different advantages. If you're Image, if an Image book, for example, Image will carry stock for you no matter where you're at. That's just the benefit of them being a huge publisher that has a lot of infrastructure. I always really admire what SourcePoint Press is doing, because they take their ground game really seriously. They're at every single show, and if you're a SourcePoint creator, you have a place to table. And I think that's a huge benefit for them. And so
I understand Vault's heading in that kind of direction as well. They're doing a lot of support. Yeah, I think it's something that kind of came up when we did a report on New York Comic Con, and we were talking about the landscape of comics at these shows, and also talking about how while the big two had their place. It was more the independents now that were really kind of driving and were the engine of the industry. I mean, admittedly, that's not new, but certainly a convention, an actual for visibility and support of their creative teams, to have that that huge independent market and that those companies really kind of driving what's going on at a convention. I think it's exciting. We'll go into a couple of, a couple of questions then. We've got Aaron Neighbours who's jumped in. Who's talking. When I was talking to David yesterday, he mentioned that he's been tabling at the Action Lab booth, and someday he may need to table in Artist Alley. This may affect his sales. That's an interesting point. Just expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, to add some additional content or context to it, we were talking about New York Comic Con, and the thing is it's one of my favorite shows, but it's been because Action Lab's been so generous and that they've let me table with them every single year, and rather than being an Artist Alley, which I think is kind of extremely chaotic, it's the most chaotic thing I've ever seen at a con. I've been on the show floor. And that's that is more driven and directed traffic, and we get great foot traffic. And so I can sell upwards of, I could sell probably 150 books in a weekend at that location. And yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily match that in Artist Alley. So there are certain advantages that come with that. Same thing with San Diego Comic-Con. I feel like this year Action Lab had a big united booth rather than splitting up their Action Lab and Danger Zone booths. And the sales were really strong as a result. And I don't know if Artist Alley would necessarily match that. I feel like other shows, it's not quite as beholden to that. The difference between the show floor and Artist Alley are not quite as stark. But yeah, I mean, that's something that, I think creators need to take into consideration is, when they start out, if the book does well, they'll often have a longer standing relationship with their first publisher. And that's sort of one of the cons of diversifying. I mean, it's something that I think everybody has to do eventually, but it is sort of a con is that, oh, okay, well, can I table with these publishers if I've got books from everywhere, or am I just going to have to commit to kind of going under my own steam? So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely it's something that I'll have to figure out eventually. But yes, I guess I'll get to that bridge when I get there.
Indeed. I mean, that's something I'm seeing a number of shows here in the UK, and I don't know if this is something that's happening in the US as well, is a number of conventions are also dedicating specific space to writers. It's almost kind of, it's a very dedicated space, so at least then there's a place for authors, not only of comics, but also of prose, to gather together. And I think that's an interesting aspect of way of approaching it, because at least then people understand that this is, you're not going to be seeing somebody drawing. It's not going to be a commissions type thing. It's not an artist-based table. We are talking about a storyteller. At which point you then have, I think that's an interesting route to go.
I mean, this is just for my limited amount of experience. I haven't experienced any of that yet. And actually, for me, I really prefer that. I kind of love being thrown in the mix, because you'll have like an artist sitting next to you, and or you'll have somebody selling prints next to you, or somebody selling merch next to you, and I kind of like that because the thing is it also just helps draw foot traffic. And for me, foot traffic, it's the lifeblood of everything. I always say, I've gotten usually pretty lucky with my foot traffic situation. I can really count on one hand the number of times that I've kind of rolled snake eyes on it. And for me though, it's those shows that I don't have the foot traffic. There's nothing you can do. You could have the best book in the world. You could have the best pitch game in the world. If you don't have the foot traffic, you're dead in the water. And unfortunately, that's just a gamble. I again, to not mention names to protect the innocent. There was a show I did this year that I was really excited about. I'd never been before, and it was like the Bermuda Triangle. Whatever reason, our aisle was just like a ghost town. The aisle in front of us, decent foot traffic. The aisle behind us, decent foot traffic. Whatever it was, our aisle just like it was like a tumbleweed, and that was really frustrating for me. and it's but it was also a learning experience. I feel like it's very easy to put pressure on yourself for something that you might not have any control over. I think we often have that illusion of we're in control of our situation, and we can make anything work. Sometimes you just got a bad roll of the dice, and if you do enough shows, that's just, it is what it is, and you just have to ask yourself, was I unlucky this time, or is this just not a good show for me? And that's why I always say, like, it's a numbers game. Everything in comics is a numbers game. And I feel like you're gonna have to learn rejection very quickly. I always laugh that I survived online dating in New York City, and it was the best preparation for comics that I will ever get. Because you have to learn to go through numbers very quickly, and you have to not take rejection personally. And sometimes you take your bad breaks and you got to walk them off. And I feel like the more you put yourself out there, the less those losses will hurt you. And the more you'll just realize, oh, this one's not me, this was them. Versus figuring out, okay, if this happens to you enough times in enough shows, maybe it is me. Maybe I need to reconfigure. Maybe I need to think things differently.
Well, I think also an advantage when it comes to tabling a convention is also having that strength of having new books to show. And
Sure.
it's because I have seen a number of shows and I've been to a number of conventions here in the UK where it's the same books and it's the same, and they're trying to sell to a market which is going to convention to convention to convention,
Right.
and they're seeing the same books, and that's where things can hurt. Thankfully, that's not happening with yourself, because you do have new titles and you have new stuff to show, including the new book going to the chapel. How's that been at conventions? And what's been the response at the table so far for that?
Sure. People have been really liking that book, and it's an interesting book because it's kind of a curveball. Spencer and Locke is nerd bait. It's what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City. I make no bones that that's a book that diehard comics fans are going to be like, oh, that's interesting. I want to see if this loser sticks the landing. Going to the chapel, it's direct market counter programming. And so you sort of, there are different ways to pitch that book that appeal to different audiences. And so I have a modular pitch that I will kind of switch up depending on who I'm talking to. But the response to it's been great. I mean, for me, it's interesting how you mentioned about, people having the same books. And I think as an indie person, I actually have a little bit of an advantage because we don't have the deep market penetration that an Image would, or there are a lot of people who they slept on the books. And so we've been selling Spencer and Locke Volume 1 for a long time, and we still haven't hit that peak audience saturation yet, which is really encouraging for me. I always try to make my books, I'm always thinking of the long tail. Is this going to be an evergreen kind of book? Is this something that I could sell for 5 years? Because I might have to. But going to the chapel, it's been, the reaction to it has been incredible. We got a very unexpected but welcome endorsement from Patton Oswalt a few weeks ago. Gabriel Luna, the new Terminator, just picked up both issues last night at my Halloween.
I was going to try and dig out that Instagram picture. That is a hell of a pic to kind of catch around.
And again, so much of it is luck. But so much of that luck is just because, well, I'm like, I might as well put myself in as many places as possible, because the more times I'm out there, the more chances I have of lightning to strike. In this case, lightning really, really struck. He liked the pitch and he was very excited about it. And I'm always I'm very grateful for whenever people who have no business reading my books are really excited about reading my books. But I think it all funnels down to, it's the practice of the pitching. Going to the chapel, when I first started pitching that book, it went down like a lead balloon. I realized very quickly you can't ask people at a con, hey, do you like rom-coms? Nobody will admit to it. And so, now it's sort of depending on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to men, I'll usually say, do you like Quentin Tarantino? If there are women, I say, hey, are you a fan of Ocean's 11? And that's usually sort of a good way to get my foot in the door. And then you can say, well, this is Die Hard meets Wedding Crashers. It's about a gang of bank robbers that thinks robbing rich people's weddings would be easier than robbing banks, and finding out just how wrong they are. Or, if I'm pitching it to women, they really love this pitch. I say, it's about a bride who becomes the ringleader of her own hostage situation to get out of walking down the aisle. The reactions I get to that pitch are
I
universal.
like how fluid. I like how fluid the pitch is.
Yeah, they burst out laughing like it is, and that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is because I knew, I feel like there are very few books, especially in the direct market, that are catering to women. And what little we're doing is kind of lip service, I think, at this point. And so, when women hear that pitch, they get it on like a deep emotional level. So yeah, I mean, people, have been selling the books have been moving really nicely. And I think that's in spite of it just being a single issue. Our second issue only came out last week, so I missed convention season for it. All I had was a first issue to go by, and I blew through almost 300 of them just in 2 or 3 shows.
Wow.
And some of that is, like I was talking about earlier, being able to leverage one book against the other, by saying, hey, by the way, Spencer and Locke, that's kind of my flagship book. It's the thing I've got trades for. It's the thing that's at a higher price point. It's the thing that I carry in bulk. If you buy both volumes of it, I'll throw in the first issue Chapel for free. And so that way people they're already excited about one book. They say, you know what, I'll take a chance on this book. And I always try to, my thought is, I always want my first issues to be the thing that hook you. I read so many books out there that frankly just feel like kind of a half-hearted IP pitch, and you see that pretty quick. I think readers are smart enough to know, like, oh, this is somebody trying to get a movie. My thought is, I would much rather my comic be a really good comic, and if it's a really good comic, then the rest of that will follow. There's, I can't tell you how many people told me, oh, Spencer and Locke, that's not a cinematic comic. And then people really started liking it. And then we started getting like people calling us asking, hey, are the rights available? And so, yeah, I always just say, okay, is this a good first issue? Is this something that'll get somebody invested for the rest of the book? Sure, there's going to be a percentage that say no, and that's fine. There's, I would, as long as I take my best college swing at it, the people who don't like it, yeah, it's statistics. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to just get the book in people's hands and still be able to get some sort of financial return on it, whether it's the amount of 2 trades minus like $2 for a single, that's a worthwhile trade for me. And at the end of the day, as much as we've been talking about money and trying to make the rent and trying to pay the bills and trying to pay for more comics, all of which are really important, I think something that indie creators need to realize is their first few books are loss leaders. They are calling cards for more work. They're calling cards to building a fan base, and so being able to get those books in people's hands and not take a loss, that's mission accomplished right there. And so yeah, I've been really fortunate, really lucky that just people have been kind of responding to the books in the way that they have been, and so it's been turning into something more and more viable with every new book that comes out.
Well, I mean, certainly the response and reaction that people have been giving to the book, I mean, it speaks volumes about how the book's been going down, and it really is it's a strong book. And if you haven't checked it out, if you're watching, if you've not checked it out going for the Chapel yet, really do your best to find a copy, because it was absolutely fantastic. Where are you going to be kind of practicing that pitch then, coming down the line? What cons have you got lined up, certainly for the end of the year and leading into next year?
Well, thank goodness my con season is over for 2019. I'm going to be doing I'm trying to do a store signing in my hometown for the holidays, but beyond that, I'm done for 2019. But 2020, I've already booked 5 shows already. I'm doing Long Beach Comic Expo in January. I'm doing C2E2 at the end of February, followed by Emerald City in March. I've already confirmed Planet Comic Con in Kansas City that I'm very excited about, and Wizard World St. Louis in June. But I'm sure I'll be doing more shows. I'd be pretty surprised if I wasn't doing San Diego and New York again. I'll do Baltimore again, as long as they'll have me. And yeah, there are a few more shows. I'm trying to get in with MegaCon and Fan Expo Boston again, because those were such wonderful shows this year. So yes, plan on seeing me just as often as you have this year. Yes, sleep is for the weak. I don't need it.
If not more.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. To find out more about where you are going to be appearing, if you could just share your social media, where is the best place to find out about what you're up to?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PeposeD. It's my last name and first initial. You can also follow Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel. Spencer and Locke is one word, all spelled out, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's Go to the Chapel on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also sign up for my new newsletter, Pep Talks. It's at bit.ly/pepnews. And every single newsletter I send out every 3 weeks, I have a list of cons and signings that I'll be doing. So you'll be able to find me wherever I am.
Excellent. David, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm certain that we could have gone into a lot more stuff in terms of like favorite fan interactions. I'm certain that Spencer and Locke had its fair amount of cosplay showing up. You say, well, it must have freaked you out the first time that happened. But
it was great.
I can imagine. But thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you down the line as well. Hopefully we'll catch up with you at a con. And hopefully we'd like to have you back on as well. But certainly as we get into the new year, see how 2020 is shaping up for conventions.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
I think that'd be great. Thank you very much indeed, David. And we'll speak to you soon.
Have a good one.
Excellent. Take care. So there you go, David Pepose. Do check out his books. Like I say, Spencer and Locke is a great read if you get the chance to read that one. But yes, Going to the Chapel has been, in my mind, one of the highlights of 2019 when it comes to independent comics. I mean, there's been a couple which have really kind of got my attention. In fact, if I just bring Mark Searby into the mix. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
What's the name of... Hello, what's Mark Miller's book? Is it Space Bandits? I think it is. That I put that right. I put that right up with David's book because it's very female driven, and it's a different take on something. So yeah, there's some interesting books that's doing around. But there we go. Yes, I enjoyed that. That was good. Hopefully we'll get David back on at some point. But it's now time to move on. I know we're going to have to make this a little bit shorter than I planned, but MCM has been taking place in Excel this weekend. And I've been seeing all sorts of stuff and nonsense coming in on social media. Number one, it's been great to see that MCM have really ramped up their marketing game. So their social media has been very impressive. In terms of footfall, that's been an interesting question. Considering that Friday and Sunday have been a little bit muted and quieter. I actually saw a post about someone posted today saying, okay, this does not look like a typical Sunday at MCM. This is a bit weird. The back stairs or the stairs leading out to the green is quieter than usual. But then you read about Saturday, which was just off the chart. At which point we then asked you, Mr. Searby, you went on the Saturday. How was it?
Hectic. Absolutely hectic. Like really busy. I mean, you've been before, Leonard. You know what it's like as well. Like when doors open at 9 o'clock, you have the hardcore fans there, and they're waiting for the shutters to just basically go up, and they're in. And it's busy, but you can walk around. It's quite nice. There's lots of room to walk around. But I did notice around 12-ish, because general entry is 11 o'clock. By 12 o'clock, it was absolutely packed. And by the time I was leaving about 1:15, the way that the Excel is done is that there's two sides basically that have got the con in them, and then in the middle everybody walks through, and in the middle it just got into a bottleneck. People were just stood because nobody could move, because it was just chaos. It really was. Now, and it was like that all the way through.
Because I know that you do go to a lot of the different areas of MCM. You go for the autograph areas, you go to the signings, you check out a couple of the panels, you do kind of like check the full landscape. And usually at an MCM, it's very much bottlenecked in a certain area. So I know that they've been doing some changes to the way they're doing their autograph sessions. I know that that's kind of like is it pre-scheduled, and it's kind of like that's a little bit more streamlined and organized. You usually get a bit of a breather around the area of kind of the back of the comic village. There's usually some spots where you can get a bit of a breather. It's sounding that just didn't happen yesterday. That it was just wall to wall.
Yeah, kind of, pretty much. I mean, the quietest area was the autograph area, but that was because nobody was there yet. And that's because you actually touched on it there, Leonard. They've done a slight change in that you can now pre-order your autograph. So you don't have to get in there first time, get to the table, and then you pay at the table. Now you can buy them, pre-order them online. Same with photographs as well. Before you go, and you choose a time slot. You choose 10:30, 2:30, or 4:30, and they have an allocated number of them. I've got to say, I did an autograph yesterday with Simon Pegg, and I've got to say it worked really well, like absolutely perfectly. Like there was no argy-bargy or anything. People were not sure what was going on. The lines were nicely done. You turned up, you had a QR code. Somebody looked at that QR code, you were in the line, that was it. Then they zapped the QR code when you were at the table. Then they had somebody looking at what you wanted sign in. That was pushed on to then the person who was getting it signed, and yeah, and you're out. Honestly, it was absolutely faultless, to be honest with you. And Simon Pegg is a big name, a big draw, absolutely. And the way that they handled it was really good. I got in the queue, and I was towards the end as well. I was towards the back of it. I got in there, and we were done within half an hour, like really quick. And it wasn't that they were pushing you through and you couldn't spend time talking to him either. You could have a chat, 2 or 3 minutes at the most, maybe, but it didn't feel like it was sign and out the door and whatever else. They've done it very nicely, actually. I think this is working very well, and I think they're going to look back on it next week when they've got all of their data to look at and think, actually, do you know what? We should do this more, because it works very, very well. Because also it gives you, the attendee, the time to go. So you're not in a queue for 2 hours waiting for somebody to turn up and thinking, okay, well, how long is he going to take to sign? So basically you turn up within a scheduled time, and that's it. So you can walk around the con for 2 hours and then turn up at 11, and you would still be in that queue, and you will still be seen, because they're only selling a certain number of autographs and photo ops as well. It's a really interesting thing, and I've got to say that I thought they did very well on it.
That's very interesting. It's a strange, well, I'm not going to say strange, it's an evolution. I mean, there's been a number of times when that kind of system has been suggested at New York, it's been suggested at San Diego, it's been suggested at a number of cons, and people have just gone, hang on a second, how does this actually work with moving the guests around, sort of like allocating time to the guest? How does that actually work in terms of so crowd movements? How does that really play with what the audience is going to do? And it seems to have worked. So I can imagine as a test bed, perhaps this has worked really well, and I'm curious to see how MCM or are going to roll it out over the rest of their brands. In terms of actual attending then, because you and I have talked about MCM, especially this particular show, and the way that they've announced guests and the way that they've done the lead up to the show. And it's something that I put out on social media today, in the fact that MCM really didn't announce any guests for this show till a month to 6 weeks prior to the actual event. They've left it really late, which is unlike any other convention out there. Every other convention, they announce a couple of guests really early, like 6 to 8 months, and then just slowly but surely ramp up to the actual event itself. MCM London, it's all been in the last 4 to 6 weeks. Is this been a case of then people buying tickets to MCM because they know that MCM will deliver and the guests will be there regardless? Or is it a case of, I mean, I'm really curious how that will have affected the brand and the audience.
It's a good question, actually. It's a really good question. But, MCM have done this before, where they've waited until last minutes to announce some people. So it's not unusual to obviously
for this one, just how late they've left it.
Yeah, possibly.
I mean, because even for MCM, even like 3 months out, then they'll start ramping up guests and announcing stuff. We didn't even know that there was going to be the C panel till like the Wednesday or Tuesday prior to the actual show.
Yeah, yeah. I genuinely do think that they've got things out there, but they can't. They've got to wait until all confirmation. And the problem is, I think, with something like, because it's the end of October, getting those confirmations are not going to happen until much later in the time. This is the thing. You know, it's not a bank holiday weekend here, whereas the one that they do in London in May is a bank holiday weekend. So people will be here for a whole weekend. So they've got to turn around and say, listen, you can come for a whole weekend and, you know, have a good time. But this one's slightly different. So I'm not sure if it's affected them or not. I mean, it certainly didn't feel like it on Saturday. I've got to say, you know,
Sure.
people were there, you know, banging up to the walls, to be honest. And they were clearly taking money. I mean, money exchanging hands was virtually everywhere, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. We've got a Sam Payne who's left a comment. That's on the screen at the moment. Maybe with all the cancellations at other cons recently, they didn't want to dig themselves the same hole. It can be I mean, we can talk about this as something, as a real plan of attack for MCM. And I like I say, I was really curious to see how the reaction with the audience would be, because usually when you have a convention of this size, it's usually linchpinned around a certain guest. It's, at least then it's kind of like the tentpole which everything else can be hung on. The tentpole here has been the show itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it has. It absolutely has. And I have to say, I mean, there will be a review on the Convention Collective of MCM later in the week, but I will say that it felt like MCM when they'd first been taken over by ReedPop, as in it felt like a whole convention, as in they weren't just hanging on one or two guests. It felt like a whole thing. Like activations were a big thing again this weekend. So like, I mean, I did 3 activations there. They had a Dr. Sleep activation where you had a photo taken with Danny Torrance. They had one for The Witcher as well, where you have a photo taken pulling a sword out, and they had a Watchmen thing as well, where you take a photo next to the big clock and everything, which is great. You know, so what happens is you have your photo, they print out the photo as well, like this. So they basically print out each photo they print out, but they also send you a digital copy as well, so you can put it on social media straight away as well. However, then what happens?
Then you're doing the marketing for them.
Exactly. However, also at the activations, they give you some very nice freebie stuff as well. So like this lovely Watchmen poster here as well. So that was given away. Some lanyards as well. And if you were there at certain times, they were giving out free T-shirts, and there was free books going, and there was free tote bags. And it was weird. It felt like being at MCM on Saturday, it felt like being at San Diego Comic-Con circa 2015, 2016, where there was free T-shirts galore. Like you couldn't move for free swag. And that's what it felt like at MCM. And to be honest with you, that's the best way of getting people in. That is the best marketing tool. Like even if it's just a pin badge, you're getting people to stand at your stall. And it worked. It really worked. Like the amount of stuff that was being given out for free, but people were walking around with them. That was the thing. And it brought people home to realize that, okay, we should be seeing further afield in the convention. We should be going to Artist Alley. We should be going over to the computer game section as well. That's the thing. It brought people to different areas. Granted, it was free swag, but at the same time, it was bringing people to those areas that they might not have been to before.
You see, that's where the swag always, I mean, that's what they make it for. At the end of the day, they want you to, it's not just something to give out. There's a bit of give and take. I can appreciate that. 2 things I want to touch on. First things, a bit of a change with Funko, which I thought was interesting, in that they went cashless this time round. It was all credit card only. There was no cash changing hands. How did that change the movement at that booth? Because I saw a picture that you posted. It was as manic as usual.
It was absolute chaos trying to get into the booth. I mean, it's a huge booth. It really is. And they put it together very nicely. But when doors opened at 9 o'clock, I went down there about 3 minutes past 9. And you saw that picture, Leonard. You know, feel free to put it up on your social media. But it was chaos. It was absolute chaos. There was no line management. There was no nothing. But it seemed that once people got in there, it was a very smooth transaction. As you said, cashless. So you're just tapping it. It's just a tap, or you're just putting in your and you're off. I've got to say that after that, after they got the lines sorted, it seemed to be working quite nicely. My only concern is they need better security earlier in the day.
Right, because I've been hearing about this with the bag search area and the way that they maneuver people around. That's all. I mean, then again, this is something that MCM and Excel have been working on for a while. I don't think any convention's ever going to really crack that nut in a correct way. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is something that actually kind of piggybacks off New York Comic Con and how we've seen a lot of the big events, the big conventions with their content. The streaming services, they are partnering, or MCM have been partnered huge with the streaming services this time around, with Netflix, with the likes of Sky Atlantic, which would be obviously HBO Go. How's that changed the kind of content that we've seen, or you saw at MCM this time around?
Well, you and I were both critical the last MCM back in May by saying there's not enough panels. And I have been very critical about MCM and saying, you're not doing enough with panels. This is what you need to do. But to be fair to them, they did, there wasn't enough panels, but the panels that were there were huge. So Jason Momoa was there on Friday doing the TV show that's on Apple TV. Also, there was 3 kids from It, the new film as well. So they had a panel. Simon Pegg had a panel on Sunday. I mean, to be honest with you, they really were big panels. Like everywhere you looked, it looked like big panels, which is great. I just feel like there needed to be more of them. Like on the main stage, there was only 4 each day. It felt like you could put 6 in. Yeah, you like Friday was huge because you had Jason Momoa, followed by.
You're saying that, but I'm just going to say, you're saying 4 a day. We've been talking about the guests that were invited. Was there enough content to get those other 2 panels, which would fill those seats? Because we're talking like the C panel, which would have filled that room. Simon Pegg, which would have filled that room. The last thing they want to do is put a panel on and have just the front third full.
Yeah, well, that's a valid point, but at the same time, it's another panel. It's getting, faces there in front of it. That's the thing. It happens at San Diego. You go into Hall H, you're like, there's about 100 people here or something. It occasionally happens, but it feels like they should be putting in at least 1 more panel, certainly on that main stage. There is more than enough room. As I said, Friday, you had Jason Momoa, followed by the 3 kids from It, followed by Sing Along Nightmare Before Christmas. I love that film. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I don't need to sing along to it at 5 p.m. This is the thing. It felt like it was like a filler panel, and maybe there was a couple of those. Yeah, I just feel they've got the panel quality about right now in terms of who they're getting over, which is great. And don't forget, as you said, Leonard, they're partnering with streaming services as well, which is great. I just feel like they could be doing a little bit more in terms of how many panels they've got, because there are people going just for these panels. This is the thing. Not going for autographs, not going for photo ops. They're not going for Artist Alley or anything else like that. So once they've walked around the convention, they're sort of like, well, what do we do? And also because you get that 1 panel, then they clear the room. We should specify this. MCM clear the main stage room after every panel. So you have to come out, join the queue again.
Really?
Yeah, which to be fair, the
interesting.
couple of times I've seen it, it's worked well. I've got to say, but you're talking about some of the smallish panels as well. But yeah, I just feel like they've gone big-ish with the panels since I've been critical about it. They just need to go bigger next time. And hopefully they will, because May is a big one.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I know that you're going to be posting something on the Convention Collective, but we are at the hour mark. Let's wrap things up with kind of a 30-second impression of MCM London for this time round, for the winter edition. How's it been?
I think they've stepped it up. I think they've stepped up their game. I think maybe they've listened to criticism and they've started to open up to other options and different ideas. And it's worked very nicely. There is huge scope to go further. They're run by Reed Pop. They know what they're doing anyway. But this felt like a stepping stone back up, because you and I, Leonard, had been very critical of them previously and said it felt like they'd gone back. There was no energy. I think this time it felt like there was an energy back in the place. And that's a good thing.
Cool. Excellent stuff. Well, I mean, I look forward to seeing your report. I'd love to see your the pictures that Sam's taken as well. I think I'm looking forward to reading that. So yeah, thank you very much indeed for coming on. I really appreciate your thoughts on MCM. And yeah, May is going to be a show I'm curious to see about going. At the end of the day, I didn't attend this one because I wasn't invited as a panel host. I mean, I really wish that they streamed more stuff. I remember a year ago or even 2 years ago, MCM were really big in their streaming of content, especially from the live stage. That seems to have kind of stopped.
No, actually, do you know what? No, actually, just to correct you there, they started doing it again today, but that was not the main stage. It was the live stage in the middle. So they have started to do it, but it was only 2 today. So I think they're testing the waters again.
Fair enough. I mean, every convention center, signal and Wi-Fi coming out of that building is a nightmare. So I can appreciate it's a case of just trying to get a cable attached to a phone box somewhere. But at the end of the day, yeah, I'd really like to have seen that C panel. Really like to have seen the Simon Pegg panel. I think it'd be great if they actually got that. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's on camera. They've got it recorded. Just bang it up on YouTube. Let's have that up on the website somewhere. Thank you much indeed for coming on and talking to us about MCM. Hopefully, I'll see you in May if you are going. And you never know. I'll try my best to get my foot back on the door and be a panel host again. Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. Okay, Mark, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, sir.
Thank you very much.
Excellent stuff. So there you go. That has been our show for today. I really appreciate our guests coming on. Thank you very much indeed to David Pepose. Do check out his books and check out his social media stream, Pepose D, on Twitter, and also go to Chapel and also Spencer and Locke. Follow them on Twitter. Follow the Exploits book. We were kind of talking before he came on air about some exciting things that are possibly happening in terms of adaptations and what he's doing with the books. There's stuff that's coming down the pipe. Do follow him and keep an eye on what he's doing. Thank you very much indeed to Mark Searby. Well, I did kind of tease a special guest. I was hoping that Mark Russell Olson was going to join us on the show. He was been exhibiting in Artist Alley this weekend, but unfortunately, it looks like he wasn't able to join us. Either he's just on his way home or he's just gotten out the Excel. I can appreciate he's been a bit busy. But there we go. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the show. We are going to be announcing our guest very shortly indeed for next week. But next week is also going to be a preview of Thought Bubble Harrogate, which is going to be taking place the weekend after. So next Sunday, we'll be talking hopefully to somebody who's exhibiting at Harrogate. And hopefully we'll also, you never know, we'll try and get somebody from Thought Bubble to join us. Fingers crossed. We keep asking, but that never seems to quite happen. But you never know. But that's the third. Do join us for our show next week. And then on the 10th, we'll be broadcasting from Harrogate as we bring you our live report from Thought. We're also got a special guest lined up for that show as well. Lots of stuff. We'll keep you up to date with what's happening in terms of some special guests. There's some really good shows coming up between now and Christmas. Just to let you know, as well as several people are aware, at the end of the day, I'm a working DJ, and Christmas does get a little bit awkward for me because I want to do the show, obviously, but I also have gigs that come in. There are going to be some weeks as we head in towards December where we are going to be unfortunately cancelling the hangout. We will give you plenty of heads up, but we have got guests lined up, so it's a case of trying to keep things juggling and keep things in place. So at least then we can bring you the show when we do Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego each and every week. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm now going to head over to the Patreon page where we'll do a live stream just for our supporters. If you want to join us for that, I'm going to do a little bit of a rant to camera or a stream of consciousness to camera for 10-15 minutes. Say thank you very much indeed to everybody who's been supporting us. And hopefully you can join us for that show as well. That's patreon.com/EnglishmanSDCC. Only costs like $1 to kind of help contribute to the stream. And we would love to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon. And yeah, our special guest will be announced in the next couple of days for next week's show, Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego, episode 8. Once again, because of the times of the clocks, which went and changed yesterday at 2 o'clock, or today on Sunday morning, it is going to be the times that we've had today. That is 11 a.m. Pacific, midday Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. It's always locked to the 6 p.m. time slot. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon. And I'm going to head over to patreon.com now. Hopefully you can join us there. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.